to bring you a new type of news show.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Bring news just for you. It's Wednesday, August 21st here in Seoul. I'm Song Yujin, and you're watching News Generation. Today, we're joined by Cheska Dainha.
Happy Wednesday, everyone!
Happy Wednesday! And Park Ki-hoon.
Thank you for having me.
Lovely to have you. Now, both are here to speak on behalf of those in their 20s and 30s. Like always, we're going to start with our news feed, which covers different hashtags and news items that have been trending online. Stargazers in Korea were treated to a rare blue supermoon from Monday night into early Tuesday morning. This phenomenon occurs when a supermoon and a blue moon happen simultaneously. A supermoon is when the moon is full and at its closest point to Earth in its orbit, making it appear particularly large and bright. A blue moon refers to the occurrence of 2 full moons within a single month or 4 full moons within a single season. Monday's moon was the latter, known as a seasonal blue moon. In sports news, K-League 1 football player Yang Min-hyuk has made history as the youngest player to be awarded the league's Player of the Month title. He has also become the first player to secure 3 titles in a single month, as he was given both the Young Player of the Month and Goal of the Month awards for July. The 18-year-old, who currently plays for Gangwon FC, is set to join the English Premier League's Tottenham Hotspur next January. Finally, a report released on Tuesday by Leaders Index, a domestic business analysis firm, revealed a decline in the number of young employees at major companies in Korea. The analysis examined demographic trends at more than 100 of the top 500 companies in Korea by sales, covering the period from 2021 to 2023. While the total workforce at these companies grew from 1.37 million to 1.41 million, the number of employees under 30 years old dropped from 320,000 to 300,000. In contrast, the number of workers aged 50 and older increased from 280,000 to 310,000 during the same period. So here in the studio, I want to ask our panelists what factors might be contributing to this decline in the younger employees, and what do you think about this trend?
So I think obviously one reason could be the ongoing low birth rate here in Korea, and of course the aging population. So we're seeing more older workers opt to work much longer, delaying their retirement. I remember my late grandfather, he retired when he was 50.
Really?
And we're talking about, people who are age 50, working so much in major companies now. And another reason could be the increasing number of part-timers and contract workers who don't really count as full-time employees within these firms. And also, I think a lot of young workers like us, me and Cheska, obviously, because we're freelancers.
Not me? Yes.
Because we're full-time here at Arirang. It's slightly different.
We fall into the statistics.
Exactly.
We don't.
Sorry.
You're like the traditional worker.
I don't like the feeling of being left out.
Anyway, we like to try different types of jobs, and we like diversity within our work life as well. So I guess these things could really back the statistics that you mentioned before.
Right, definitely. This could be some of the reasons why we're seeing less young employees in major companies in the country. What could be some other reasons, Cheska, or what do you think?
I agree with Ki-hoon about the lowered birth rate, which we will discuss extensively
Right.
here today as our topic. But I would also like to address that a lot of young people are seeking different types and path of career options. So as Ki-hoon mentioned, there are different employment status, for instance, part-timers and freelancers. But I also think there's a shift from going to big corporations to going to smaller startups or even smaller companies to get a more hands-on experience when it comes to choosing employment. In addition, I actually think it's also quite great that there is an increase in 50s and over population that are still in the workforce. As Ki-hoon mentioned, I remember even in my father's generation, I think the retirement age was about mid-50s. But with the increase in life expectancies, and I know that they're still very, very willing to work and still be in the society. So I think that aspect could actually be seen as positive.
Right, which is one of the reasons why the government or more people are trying to push the retirement age even further.
I think it should be. I mean, we're living till our 80s and 90s, but it would be so sad if I just had to leave work at my 50s, to be honest.
Right, because you have so many years left.
Yeah.
Right, and that was our news feed for this Wednesday. We're now going to move on to our main discussion topic of the day. As Cheska mentioned, today we're going to talk about the low birth rate once again here on NewsGen. So take a look at the screen to find out more.
It's not just South Korea grappling with demographic challenges. The United States total fertility rate, which is the average number of children a woman is expected to have in her lifetime, hit a record low of 1.62 in 2023. The situation is even more dire in China, where the rate has plummeted to 1.0. According to the United Nations, 2/3 of the global population now lives in countries where the birth rate has fallen below the replacement level of 2.1. The rate needed to keep a population stable without immigration. So, what's behind this global decline in population?
Right, so we've talked about this several times here on NewsGen, but falling birth rates and shrinking populations are becoming major concerns for many countries around the world, not only here in Korea. So today we're talking about this low birth rate issue once again here on our show because a recent study offers new insights into why more adults in the United States are saying they're unlikely to have children. So, Cheska, could you first share us some details about the findings?
Yeah, I think it was about end of last month. New York Times published an article based on a survey done through Pew Research Center on reasons that Americans, not just Koreans, are not planning on having children. So let's take a look at the screen to see the survey results. So based on the multi-response answers, overwhelming answered that simply not wanting to was the answer for not having children, followed by wanting to focus on many different things in life and uncertainty about current world status. And the last reason was actually the financial cost for raising children. Now, Pew Research also highlighted that there are advantages to not having children, such as career advancement and generally more time for personal well-being. And there was another, actually, New York Times opinion column that was published on the 7th, which was titled "Stop Panicking About the Birth Rate." And what both articles actually commonly stated was that while some conservatives do point to the fact that, maybe young people are becoming more selfish or chasing superficial values or more instant life values, which they quoted as people going to Beyonce concerts.
For self-pleasure.
Yeah, and the shopping sprees. This argument is actually quite flawed because according to the experts, parents nowadays place more thoughts, meanings and values on family and therefore are actually being more cautious, careful and thorough about starting a family. And on top of that, I think the opinion column also stated that our generation's parents actually find greater meaning or try to find meaning in having a children before they do it.
Because they chose to have kids.
Exactly. And if we all know that in our grandparents' generation, they really didn't have that option.
Right.
For them, they didn't have proper medical care, birth control, or even not option of having children.
Right.
So it was more forced upon. And at the same time, they didn't have career options that they wanted to pursue. So I think there's a lot of different reasons that, factor into our generation having a quote-unquote lower birth rate than our previous generation.
Right, so this article is kind of mentioning that the reason why less people are trying to have kids is not because they are pursuing self-pleasure, they're actually thinking more about the pleasure of their children,
Yes,
right?
they want to put more effort into actually having a good family.
Right, so very eye-opening findings that this report mentioned. Are there any other details or points that you would like to point out, Kyun?
Yeah, so other studies show that many young Americans want to reach certain milestones before having children.
Right.
So Karen Benjamin Guzzo, a family demographer, commented on the recent New York Times article that Cheska was talking about, that young people, quote unquote, want to buy a house, pay off student debt, or comfortably afford childcare. So this is something that I totally agree to as well. Although money is not everything, it does play a huge factor,
Yes, it does.
especially within marriage and having kids. But the irony here seems to be that it's very close to impossible to own your own house.
Right.
A big enough house to raise children within the city that you want to live in, especially here in Seoul, where we're living in right now. So I think it's quite sad, but getting your own dream house, that's why I think people are kind of pushing off this the whole thought of having kids, really getting married. Another factor for not choosing to have kids is the pessimistic outlook that people have of the future.
Right.
So a study by a sociologist in the Netherlands found that people who said they thought the future generation prospects were much worse than today were less likely to become parents.
Right.
So environmental and social factors such as climate change, frequent gun violence in the US, and the recent pandemic also played a huge role discouraging young Americans not to have children at all. But this doesn't just refer to people in the US. It applies to people in developed countries as well, especially here in Korea as well.
Right.
So I think all these factors contributing to the decline birth rate is not just prevalent in the US, but it's a global demographic trend we're experiencing, except maybe Africa.
Right, so talking about how this falling birth rate is a prevalent trend in other parts of the world, to find out more, we also asked our viewers about birth rate trends in their countries, and here's what 3 of them had to say. If we look at the comments, Leonteo93 says Singapore's total fertility rate has been steadily declining over the past few decades. In 2023, it hit a record low of 0.97, which is significantly below the replacement rate of 2.1. This means the population is not replacing itself through births alone. Eddie Lee 5909 says, my birth country of Turkey had a total fertility rate of 1.51 in 2023, but the population is still increasing since the median age is low and there are few deaths. XOXO says here in the United States, it's around 1.6 for 2023. It's been in a declining state for the past few years. So based on the comments, we can see that the plummeting birth rate is a shared concern globally. Now, going back to the New York Times article and the reasons it mentioned on why less younger people are trying to enter parenthood, and to see if the younger generation actually relates to the findings, we're now going to invite a Gen Z from the United States to our talks. We'll be right back after this break. So today we're joined by Brittany Schmidt, a Gen Z from the United States. Welcome, Brittany, to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Lovely to have you. So our first question for you is, Brittany, are you seeing a noticeable decline in the desire to have children in where you're living, which is the United States?
Yes, there's definitely been a noticeable decline. Birth rates in the US have been steadily falling, and as you previously mentioned, surveys indicate that more people, especially the younger generations, are reconsidering or delaying having children. This shift reflects broader changes in society where personal freedom, career goals, and financial stability are often prioritized over starting a family.
And what do you think are some of the factors that, as you mentioned, make the younger generation consider a lot more and sometimes become a little bit more hesitant to, quickly become parents?
I think there are several key factors that contribute to the hesitation. Economic challenges are probably the biggest. Young adults today are burdened with higher levels of student debt, coupled with rising housing costs and overall living expenses. This financial strain makes the prospect of raising a child seem overwhelming and sometimes unattainable. The costs associated with parenting, such as childcare, healthcare, and education, have also skyrocketed, adding to the financial burden. And then there's also been a significant shift in social norms and lifestyle priorities. Many young people are choosing to delay marriage and raising children to focus on their education and career development. Unlike previous generations, there's a stronger emphasis on personal freedom, travel, and self-fulfillment, which sometimes takes precedence over starting a family. And
Really? Continue.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, you also have to look at the increased participation of women in the workforce.
Yes, absolutely.
As women pursue higher education and career advancement, they often delay or reconsider having children, especially given the challenges of balancing work and family life. And on top of that, access to effective contraception has given people greater control over their reproductive choices, allowing them to plan their families more carefully, or to decide not to have children at all.
Brittany, in your opinion, what do you think could be done to spark interest in parenthood among young people?
To spark interest in parenthood, addressing the economic and social barriers that discourage young people from having children is crucial. Financial support is key. Policies that reduce the cost of raising a family, such as affordable childcare, housing assistance, and access to quality education would make parenthood more accessible. Expanding tax credits for families and providing more robust parental leave policies can also alleviate the financial pressures. In addition to economic support, work-life balance would need improvement. Offering flexible work schedules, remote work options, and guaranteed job security for parents would help young people feel that they can pursue both their careers and family life without having to sacrifice one for the other.
Definitely. All right, Brittany, thank you so much for your time today and your great answers. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, so through our discussion earlier and with our live interview with Brittany, we've touched on and listened to some reasons why young Americans might be hesitant to start a family. So I want to ask our panelists, do you think that similar reasons are shared by the younger generation in Korea, the younger generation who are reconsidering having children or starting a family?
Yeah, absolutely. As we talked with Brittany, I think there are a lot of similarities and commonalities when it comes to why our generation might be thinking one more time before starting a family. But I think, for instance, the uncertainties about the current status, Ki-hoon talked about it, but like war, climate changes, and the pandemic, if you really think about it, when you can't guarantee a safe environment for your loved one, it's quite impossible to think about bringing them into your life, right? But I think from various research that were published, a key noteworthy difference between Korea and the top reasons for the United States was actually Korea not planning children were the cost of raising them, and women's career status. I think those were the top reasons. And these are actually more of a social issue rather than a personal life choice issues. So I think it shines a light on how people feel about living, working, like maybe purchasing a home in South Korea, rather than it being, I need more time to do something that I want to do. Yeah.
Right, so a shared common concern, but a bit of a different.
Yeah, a bit of difference in terms of priorities.
Right. What do you think, Yoon?
I have a different look. I mean, besides the money issues, the environment and everything, I think the biggest reason is a difference in the mindsets of the younger generations and, of course, the older generations, our parents and even our grandparents, because of advancement in technology and the change in lifestyle. You know, when our parents grew up, I'm sure they didn't have smartphones. And, you know, smartphones are great. You know, they bring a lot of entertainment, fun, but also a lot of disruption.
Right.
And you can spend a lot of time just by yourself with a smartphone in your room. Whereas in our parents' generation, they'll be outside in the playground, you know,
Riding
with a lot
the
of
swing.
Yeah, on the
Or the
swing,
slide.
just you know, playing with
fish.
catching fish, playing with worms, you know, like a lot of human interaction.
Right,
But
right.
you don't really see many kids playing in the playground anymore. Like they'll be in hagwon, you know, working after school and so on. So I think these big changes in social behavior has definitely influenced the younger people to, I guess, not really choose or even delay marriage. And I think it really comes down to, it's a choice now. You know, back then, parents are not really forced, but it was like the social norm to obviously get married. And people would actually look at you if you didn't get married, like look down on you and think, you know, what's wrong with that person? Why isn't that person married? Or why don't they have kids? I mean, do they have like health issues? But nowadays it's kind of the opposite. Like it's okay to be single, because I have a lot of single friends, but on the other hand, I have a lot of friends who are married and who have kids. So I think it's all about which way you look at it. It is a different, it could be like a problem in the future, but for now, I think happiness comes first. And there are so many fun things to do today in today's society.
I feel it.
Besides getting married and having kids, you know. So, you know what? I think it really comes down to your personal choice.
Right, it really depends on your personal choice. Now, talking about personal choices, I think I asked this to all of our panelists who are on for our low birth rate issue, but based on our discussion today, or just briefly, do you have plans to have your own children in the future?
I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but I definitely fall into the statistics of MZers who are not planning on having children.
Why?
I work very closely with the orphanage, so if my partner, who's very important, wants to become a father, I'm very open to adoption. But I think it's very unlikely that I will have my own. And actually, my reasons are very similar to what we discussed today. I don't feel completely safe or assured about my current status. I love my career, and I don't know if I'll be able to fully devote to my family. And also on the human rights level, I think there are countless children out there who don't have parents that I could mentor or support or even adopt. So for me, having a children is not my priority.
I see. Then what about you, Kyun?
I mean, if I could have a child right now, I would definitely do it. But the thing is, what I'm trying to say is, it's not totally up to me. It really depends on my partner as well, and it's a collective kind of decision you have to make. It's not just like, oh, I want kids, let's have kids. It doesn't work like that, especially nowadays. And it's a lifelong commitment to have a children and to raise them into like the child you want them to really grow up and to live this world, because we are living in a world of uncertainty and we've experienced a lot of difficult times, with the pandemic, climate change and whatnot. So I think we're being a bit more cautious and we're more educated. So we know that we don't want to. We don't want our children to go through all the hardships that we have gone through. It's very different to our parents' generation. So I really think to have a child as a blessing, you need to be a bit more thoughtful of having a child and really talk it out with your significant other first, and then be a bit more prepared both mentally and of course financially. So that's why I think it takes a longer time for the younger generation to actually choose to have kids. But I think a lot of people do end up having kids, but it's just much later. So there's no need to rush.
Right, because as you mentioned, it comes with great responsibility, commitment, and we all just want the best for our child who's not been born yet, but you don't know. And last but not least, we've mentioned this earlier, but we've discussed the low birth rate topic and how the government is trying to tackle this many times here on Newsden this year as well. So I want to ask you guys, are there any other last comments or things that you would like to add on? How was it today?
I've given this topic a lot of thought because you've done it a lot, but I just want to point out one thing that's maybe, just maybe, it's not so much that there's an issue with the low birth rate, but it's more that our previous generation was too many. So that maybe this is reaching an equilibrium, because if we set the standard on a number that is too high, what we currently have, which just might be going to an equilibrium, may seem like declining. And as we talked about here today, I don't think the number represents the quality of the parenthood. I think those are two very different things. And if we were to compare our previous generation's parenthood and the satisfaction that our kids are experiencing right now, I think there could be a certain difference. So maybe this is something to think about, if there's a real direct correlation between how many children we're having versus how happy we are at the moment.
Maybe we can talk about this issue from that perspective next time here on Newsden. All right, that's all from us today, but Newsden will be back tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. Korea time. Special thanks today to Cheska Dainha.
Pleasure's always mine, thank you.
And Park Ki-eun.
It's always a pleasure.
And thank you everyone for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow. We are News Generation.
We're not stopping. 네가 머문